Welcome to Strip Cover Lit. I am Adrian Fort, and I think I'm going to start trying to do something that I'm going to call the Weekly Reader. At least while times are strange here, um, where I just sort of talk about some of the things that I've been thinking about or considering doing on the channel or been reading, things like that. Um, I'm going to level with you. I'm going to be very honest here. Uh, my reading lately has been largely belabored, has been uninspired, has been difficult to get through. I do not know, I cannot promise that by Monday I'm going to have the seventh chapter read for Absalom, and ready to post. Um, and I apologize for that, but I don't want to fall off of creating content entirely. I tend to really beat myself up in circumstances such as that, and I know that there have been many things since December of 2015 when I launched this channel that I have promised or suggested or mentioned, which I have not come through with. But I do mean it when I say that every time that happens, um, I get a little bit disgusted with myself. I am normally someone who is um, very calculating as far as getting things done. I try to have goals and I try to reach those goals, things like that. I work very hard on those things, but right now I'm struggling. But I don't want to ignore things entirely. Uh, that said, it is difficult for me to focus right now. For anyone who doesn't know, I do work in a pharmacy retail setting, so I'm having to put in a lot of extra hours right now, doing a lot of stressful things as far as people come in all night coughing on me, sneezing on me, breathing on me. And I think largely I would probably be okay if I caught the illness that shall not be named, but I am asthmatic, and that is worrisome. I do have borderline high blood pressure, and I've had that since I was in high school. Um, and when I was in high school, I was super fit, so it seems that it is perhaps a genetic problem. Uh, and I do worry about certain people. There's certain people that I that would be vulnerable in that way, and I think that's contributing greatly to me not being able to focus as much as I would like to be able to focus right now. So what I'm going to do is what I always sort of do when I'm having trouble is I work on things. So I'm going to try to double down on work, but with the way my mind is right now, I might have to be focusing on shorter videos and shorter pieces of literature. If you are not following along with the Absalom read along, I highly suggest it because William Faulkner is William Faulkner. But B, it takes every bit of concentration and patience that you have in your being. But I think I would like to take this time to talk a little bit about some of the things that I have been reading in one offs or in downtime, just in general. And one of the artists that I have been reading is Sylvia Plath. Sylvia Plath is, in my experience, a very piss and vinegar writer. That is what I gather from her poetry. And it is largely what I enjoy out of poetry. I enjoy the piss and vinegar. I enjoy the bitter and spite. I enjoy the barbs that come with the wire. But I do struggle. I do struggle with Sylvia Plath, um, and I don't know why. Sylvia Plath writes pretty straightforward poetry. As far as the narrative of the poetry goes, it is not completely shrouded, but she's got some stuff built in. But the one thing that I keep, I've been reading Daddy by Sylvia Plath over and over again, which I think really pours on the piss and vinegar. But another one that I've been reading, so one of the things that I really enjoy about Sylvia Plath outside of the piss and vinegar is the fact that Sylvia Plath doesn't give a damn about your symbolism. Sylvia Plath does not give a damn about the way that you think poetry is. Sylvia Plath does not give a damn about your canon. Sylvia Plath is there with her pen in her hand, and it's got a blade on the other end. And with that, she is unafraid to make her own symbols, to you, which is obviously the hallmark of any great writer. This is, what is it? Minimalist criticism, or is it new criticism? I think it might be. Is it new criticism? One of the types of criticism. I can't remember exactly which one it is. One of the hallmarks of that sort of thought process in that line of criticism is that you should not have to know anything outside of the text to be able to make something of the text in question. Meaning, one of the greatest things about Shakespeare is the fact that he throws in all sorts of different mythologies and symbolisms and canons from all throughout the ages, the Bible and classic mythology, things like that. But if you don't know any of those things, a lot of those mentions will just go straight over your head, and you won't get anything out of it. Sylvia Plath, I think, so sort of the thing that you're looking at there is that Shakespeare would be greater if you didn't have to know anything about the Bible, if you didn't have to know anything about the Greek mythologies. There's an argument there. Certainly, it would be more accessible. Is accessibility a pseudonym for better? It would have a wider range appeal. But I think one of the things that Sylvia Plath is absolutely not afraid to do, one of the reasons that I appreciate Sylvia Plath, one of the reasons that I'm starting to go back to her more and more, is that she's willing to create all of her own images. And she seems to revel in it. She has a poem called Insomniac. And I wrote down the first line here because the night sky is only a sort of carbon paper. Think about how often in poetry the night sky is just this ethereal playground for all of your ideas, for anything that you find romantic. The night sky is perfection, the night sky is love, the night sky is this or that, or wonderful, magnificent. Sylvia Plath comes out and says the night sky is only a sort of carbon paper. I don't know if any of you have ever dealt with carbon paper. It is a dirty feeling substance. It is a smudgy substance. It is a paper that whenever you're working with it, you've really got to you got to watch yourself. You can get dirt on yourself. You're going to get yourself all grudged up, smudged up. And if you're writing on the carbon paper, if you're dragging your hand too heavy on the carbon paper, which I'm a lefty, it happens to me a lot, you're going to ruin everything that you put underneath. Once you take that carbon paper away, if you have the wrong piece underneath something else that you're writing on, all of a sudden you've transposed whatever numbers or letters or words you're writing again onto that. It's just a very messy process. It sucks to deal with carbon paper. The night sky is only a type of carbon paper. How dirty that feels, and how counterintuitive to the poetic canon that statement really is. How opposite that statement seems. And just a few lines later, she uses the frame bone white. Bone white light, like death. Bone white like death. Again, this very sort of counterintuitive, contra to what you've heard. It's always black that's death, isn't it? It's always the darkness and mystery therein that is death. Here, Sylvia Plath is willing to give us bone white light, like death. And when you think of all the roadkill that you drive past on the road, exposed bones, or animals that have died inside the woods, when you find them, when you stumble upon them, it's just exposed skull, so that is one of the reasons that I am starting to pick up Sylvia Plath a little bit more. Those are two of the reasons, I guess I should say, that I've been starting to pick up Sylvia Plath a little bit more lately. And I have an admission to make. Something that is very upsetting to me to have to come before you and say. I don't want to be in this position. I don't want to have to admit these things. I have railed on the channel, I don't think any in 2015. I think that was too early for this, but certainly since 2016, so 4 years-ish now, I have railed against Robert Frost. But the other day I was brushing my teeth, and I noticed a few white hairs in my beard. A couple more than were there the week before, more than I've had in previous years, and I decided I'd better give Frost another chance. I'd better sit down with some Robert Frost. So I've done that. I've started liking Robert Frost, and I can't say why. I really can't say why. I don't. I really don't know why. But I read back over after apple picking. Really kind of like it. And it sort of turned the key in the door and allowed me to shove open that that liking for a poet that I had never ever liked before. And I don't know what that says about me. Does that say that I'm getting too old and crusty and white? Does it say that I am giving in too much to the canon? I am starting to see a little bit more that Robert Frost... I used to conceptualize Robert Frost's poetry as sort of like a gatekeeper, if that makes any sense. Sort of in the way that I would identify Robert Frost with what an editor thinks poetry should be. And there's no radical there. There's no jackassery therein. There is no piss and vinegar to be found. But I think in the field of poetry that is the canon, Robert Frost is a divot as opposed to flat ground, if that makes any sense. If I can use that as narrative here. In that, I'm reading a little bit more nihilism into the things that Robert Frost is willing to say. What parts of it matter? Does anything you enjoy really bring you something of worth? Are they those things for which we must struggle that contribute the only value to life? These are questions that are very heavy. These are questions that I think Robert Frost deals with. These are questions that I think these are questions perhaps Robert Frost even struggles to answer with his poetry. And I'm starting to enjoy it. I'm starting to enjoy a little bit more of that. So it is possible in the coming weeks, months, I will have some more Frost either discussions or outright reviews on the channel. I've got a question for you. If you've made it this far into the video, um, I've got a dichotomy on the channel that separates poetry discussions from poetry reviews. To me, that dichotomy is useful because in the discussion videos, what I try to do is wriggle out one little idea or feeling or correlation in a poem and sort of examine it more wholly, versus the review for which I have a formula and I try to take an encompassing view of the poem. Is that a fruitful dichotomy, or does that just confuse when these videos come up? I think it would really help me out if you did answer that, because for me, conceptually, it helps me to be able to separate those things. Because if I've got something that's just working in the back of my mind about a poem, I can turn on the camera and go about it. Versus with a review, I'm filling out that entire sort of formulaic deal and trying to present a full analysis of some type of theme through the poem. Talking about poetry all this much, I have a brand new book of poetry that I think you're going to see a lot on the channel. This is the Penguin Book of First World Poetry. It was gifted to me, and it is intense. It is inclusive. There is a lot going on here. I am considering, I'm going to talk, the next two things I'm going to talk about, the next three things I want to talk about are things you're going to be finding on the channel sporadically popping up in the next however long. One, I am definitely going to do a poem by poem. I don't know if I'm going to do reviews or if I'm going to do discussions for these. But yeah, every poem in this I think is something that I need to talk about. And I'm going to set out on that expedition. I think I'm going to include the introduction. I think this is going to be a very long and arduous process, but it's something that I feel is necessary, because I feel that the poetry of World War I, the trench poets, they are undervalued in the United States for sure. And every time I have said that they are undervalued or underrated, I get people from across the pond in England yelling at me in the comments section, because apparently, which one is it? Sassoon? Siegfried Sassoon? One of the poets from the First World War, I think it is Sassoon, is apparently touted in England as one of the greatest English poets of all time. And I had no way of knowing that. I think it is Sassoon. But yeah, we don't, in the United States, we don't hear about it. We don't hear about any of them. I'm blanking on the trio that I really, really like right now, and for some reason there's not a table of contents here that is very useful. Sassoon, Owen, and I'm blanking on the third one. But there's a big three for me. But yeah, that's one series that I'm going to start here. I promise a million series that I start, and I never really finish. I still got the Hemingway series that I started in 2017 that I got to keep going back to, but I haven't been. But while we're speaking of things that I'm promising and never going to get around to, I've been reading a lot of Shirley Jackson. This is just the cover art. Shirley Jackson's Let Me Tell You, which is a collection of short stories, essays, and other writings. I'm going to go story by story through that. as well, because I've done the first four and I've got loose outlines for reviews for the first four short stories there. And god damn, Shirley Jackson is so good. Very underrated. Very underrated. Shirley Jackson's voice is just spot on, I think, for what it is that she's doing, is just phenomenal as far as I think that it would be often on the channel. I have compared Shirley Jackson to a television series. I don't want to do that anymore. Um, I think that in the seeds of Shirley Jackson, you have a lot of proto George Saunders. There's a lot of speculative fiction. There's a lot of we'll just tweak one little thing in this person's day, and the whole world will be weird because of it. There is a lot of understated humor. There are a lot of protagonists whose ambitions are questionable when they're not ambiguous. Um, there is a lot of there's a lot of use of an ignorant protagonist, um, which is something that I find often the protagonist in George Saunders short stories are searching for an answer. And this is not true. This is not always true. It's easy to say, well, yeah, that's what a story is someone looking for an answer. Um, Hemingway short stories basically all involve someone who's pretty sure they've got the answer. A lot of the I'm trying to think of somebody. Oh, The Great Gatsby, F. Scott Fitzgerald. A lot of the stories for F. Scott Fitzgerald that I've read, anyway, are a protagonist who is kind of coming to the conclusion that there is no answer. So, yeah, I think this is a particular, not maybe not a particularly unique place to be coming from, but definitely something that is not a given. It is not given that the protagonist of any short story is ignorant to what is going on or searching for an answer. And the last thing I think I'm going to talk about here is something that I am working on. I've been doing the poetry readings on Sundays, and I'm working on, and this is probably not going to be the highest quality, but I'm doing my damnedest. I am working on getting an audio version of The Mask of the Red Death up on the channel. It's a lot of work. I know it doesn't seem that way when you're just saying, you're just reading a short story out loud. Whew. Especially when you're talking about somebody like Poe. A lot of the sentences that you don't notice how awkwardly they're written when you're reading them, because you can skim along and understand what's happening. A lot more difficult to read them out loud. I was going to just spring that on the channel. I thought it would be kind of befitting of the times, if nothing else, but definitely something new. I've never done that depth of a reading on the channel. But yeah, that is all I have for this week's weekly reader. I hope to see you back next week. I hope to have Absalom ready for Monday to go up, but I'm going to apologize in advance if that is not the case. Thank you.